The woman standing at my office door looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. 30 seconds into our conversation, my blood ran cold. This wasn't a potential client. This was the woman who walked out of my life 19 years ago and never looked back. My mother. And the teenager hiding behind her? Apparently, I have a sister now. "Andrew, honey," she said, like no time had passed at all. "I know this is unexpected, but we need to talk about your success. Family should share everything, right?" I'm a lawyer. I've handled complicated cases, but nothing prepared me for this moment. Nothing prepared me for what she would ask next.
My name is Andrew. I'm 30 years old, and by most standards, I've made it. I'm a successful attorney at a respected law firm. I own my home. I drive a decent car. My grandparents, the two people who actually raised me, now live in a beautiful house that I bought for them, finally getting the retirement they deserve. But my path here, it wasn't handed to me. It was carved out through every part-time job, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, when I wondered if I'd ever make it out of the hole that was dug for me when I was just 11 years old. Because that's when she left. That's when my mother decided that being a parent was too hard. That her grief over my father's death was more important than the child who was also grieving. That's when she walked away and never looked back. Until now. Now she's back, and she doesn't want a relationship. She doesn't want to apologize. She wants money. She wants a piece of everything I built without her. This is my story, and I need to tell it. I remember the day my father died with crystal clarity, even though part of me wishes I could forget. I was 11 years old, sitting in math class, struggling with fractions that seemed impossibly complicated at the time. Now I realized they were the easiest problem I'd faced that year. The principal came to the classroom door. My teacher's face changed. They called my name. In that moment, walking down that hallway with its fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. My father had a heart attack at work. He was only 35 years old. Healthy, or so we thought. One moment he was presenting in a meeting, and the next, he was on the floor. They tried CPR, they called an ambulance, but by the time they got him to the hospital, he was gone. My mom picked me up from school that day, and I barely recognized her. She looked hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made her, her. She didn't cry, she didn't talk, she just drove home in silence while I sat in the passenger seat, my mind spinning with a reality I couldn't process. A father. I had a father that morning, and now I didn't. The funeral was a blur. Relatives I barely knew patted my head and said things like, "Be strong," and "You're the man of the house now." I was 11. I didn't want to be the man of anything. I wanted my dad back. I wanted to show him my science project. I wanted to watch basketball with him on Sunday like we always did. But that wasn't going to happen ever again. My mom barely held it together through the funeral. My grandparents, my dad's parents, stayed with us for a few weeks, trying to help. My grandmother cooked. My grandfather tried to talk to my mom, to get her to engage, to help her process her grief, but she was unreachable. 2 months after my father died, I woke up to an empty house. I walked downstairs, expecting to find my mom in the kitchen like usual, even if she was just staring at her coffee in silence. But she wasn't there. The kitchen was empty. The living room was empty. I called for her. Nothing. Then I saw the note on the kitchen table. It was short. Brutally short. "I can't do this anymore. Your grandparents will take care of you. I'm sorry." That was it. No "I love you," no explanation of where she was going or when she might come back. Just 8 words that shattered what was left of my childhood. I stood there, holding that piece of paper, reading it over and over, thinking maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was more on the back. Maybe this was a joke, but there was nothing else. She was gone. When my grandparents arrived later that day, I'd called them panicking. They found me still sitting at the kitchen table, holding that note. My grandmother started crying immediately. My grandfather, a man who rarely showed emotion, looked older than I'd ever seen him. "We've got you, Andrew," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "We've got you." And they did. But the damage was done. In the span of 2 months, I'd lost both parents, one to death and one to abandonment. Living with my grandparents was an adjustment, but not in the ways you might think. They were loving, patient, and completely committed to giving me the best life possible. But they were also in their late 60s, on fixed retirement income, and suddenly responsible for a grieving, angry 11-year-old boy. Money was tight. My grandfather had worked in construction his whole life, and my grandmother had been a secretary. They'd saved enough for a modest retirement, but raising a child? That wasn't in the budget. My father had been the main breadwinner in our family, and when he died, the life insurance money had been in my mother's name. She'd taken it all when she left. We moved from the house I'd grown up in to my grandparents' smaller home across town. New school, new neighborhood, new everything. Except I brought all my trauma with me, stuffed in cardboard boxes along with my clothes and toys. School was rough. I went from being a decent student to barely passing. I was angry at everything. Angry at God for taking my dad, angry at my mom for leaving, angry at the other kids who complained about their parents not buying them the newest video game when I'd give anything just to have parents again. I got into fights, I skipped classes, I talked back to teachers. The school counselor called my grandparents multiple times. Each time, my grandmother would sit me down at the kitchen table, her eyes tired and worried, and ask me what was wrong. What was wrong? Everything was wrong. But then something shifted. I came home one day to find my grandfather sitting at the dining table, looking at bills spread out in front of him. He didn't know I could see him, but he looked so worried, so worn down. My grandmother came up behind him and put her hand on his shoulder, and I heard her say, "We'll figure it out. We always do." They were struggling because of me, because they'd taken on the responsibility of raising me when my own mother wouldn't. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep making their lives harder. They'd already sacrificed everything to take me in. The least I could do was get my act together. I was 14 by then. I started focusing on school again. I brought my grades up, I stopped fighting, and I got a job. My first job was at a local grocery store bagging groceries and collecting shopping carts from the parking lot. I could only work limited hours because of child labor laws, but every paycheck felt like a victory. I'd hand most of it to my grandmother and she'd cry and try to give it back, but I'd insist. For the family, I'd say. That phrase became my mantra. High school was a blur of classes, homework, and work. While other kids were going to parties and football games, I was stocking shelves or doing homework in the break room during my shifts. I wasn't resentful about it. Okay, maybe sometimes I was, but mostly I felt proud. I was contributing. I was helping my grandparents who had helped me when I had no one else. My grandfather's health started declining during my junior year. His back, destroyed from decades of construction work, got worse. He needed surgery, but the recovery time meant he couldn't do the odd jobs he'd been taking to supplement their income. So I worked more. I got a second job on weekends at a landscaping company. Between school and 2 jobs, I'd barely slept. My grandmother begged me to slow down, but I couldn't. They'd given up their peaceful retirement for me. This was the least I could do. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside during my senior year. "Andrew," she said, "your grades are excellent, but you look exhausted. What's going on?" I explained my situation. I expected a lecture about balance or teenage burnout. Instead, she said something that changed my life. You know what you should consider? Law school. You're smart, you're disciplined, and you've overcome more than most people face in a lifetime. Lawyers can make real money, Andrew. You could really help your grandparents. Law school. I'd never even considered college, much less law school. Kids like me didn't become lawyers. We became mechanics or tradesmen or retail managers if we were lucky. But that seed was planted. I started researching. I learned about scholarships, about state schools with good law programs, about the LSAT. I learned that if I worked hard enough, if I wanted it badly enough, maybe I could actually do this. I spent the next year preparing. I studied for the LSAT in every spare moment. I applied to every scholarship I could find. I wrote essays about my father's death, my mother's abandonment, and my grandparents' sacrifice until my hands cramped. When I got my acceptance letter to the State University's pre-law program with a full scholarship, I cried. My grandmother cried. Even my grandfather, tough as nails, had tears in his eyes. "Your dad would be so proud," he said, hugging me tight. "We're so proud." I thought about my mother in that moment. I wondered if she knew. I wondered if she cared. Then I pushed those thoughts away. She'd made her choice. I'd make mine.
College was the hardest thing I'd ever done, and I'd already done some pretty hard things. I was balancing a full course load with work-study programs and a part-time job off campus. Most of my classmates were from families who could afford to send them to college, who didn't have to work, who could focus solely on their studies and social lives. I wasn't bitter about it. Well, not usually. But there were moments when I'd be in the library at 2 in the morning, exhausted from my shift at the campus bookstore, trying to finish a paper while my roommate stumbled in drunk from a party, and I'd wonder what it would be like to have that kind of freedom. But I had a goal. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about my grandparents. My grandfather's back was getting worse. My grandmother was developing arthritis. They were getting older, and they'd given me everything. I was going to give them something back. I graduated with honors and got into a solid law school. Not Harvard or Yale, but a respected state school with a good bar passage rate. More scholarships, more loans, more juggling of work and studying. Law school was brutal in ways undergrad never was. The competition, the stress, the sheer volume of reading and analysis required. It pushed me to my limits. There were nights I called my grandmother breaking down, saying I couldn't do it, that I wasn't smart enough, that I should just drop out and get a regular job. "Andrew," she'd say in her gentle voice, "you've already overcome so much. This is just one more mountain. You've climbed bigger ones." She was right. Losing my father was harder than contract law. Being abandoned by my mother was harder than civil procedure. Living with uncertainty and poverty was harder than any exam. I kept going. My grandfather died during my second year of law school. His back had never recovered from the surgery, and the complications just kept mounting. I flew home for the funeral, missed a week of classes, and felt like I was 11 years old again, losing someone I loved. At the funeral, I sat next to my grandmother, holding her hand, and I made her a promise. "I'm going to finish. I'm going to become a lawyer, and I'm going to take care of you the way you took care of me. I promise." She squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "He was so proud of you. We both are." I threw myself into my studies after that. Every case brief, every mock trial, every exam was for them, for my grandfather's memory, for my grandmother's future. I graduated in the top 15% of my class. I passed the bar exam on my first try, and I got a job at a respected law firm with a starting salary that felt like winning the lottery. My first paycheck, I bought my grandmother a new refrigerator. The old one had been making weird noises for years, and I'd always felt guilty that I couldn't afford to replace it. When the delivery guys installed it, my grandmother cried and said it was too much, that I needed to save my money. But I could see the relief on her face, and that made it worth every penny. Over the next 5 years, I built my career. I worked insane hours, took cases other associates didn't want,
proved myself over and over. I made partner at 28, which was almost unheard of at my firm. My income went from good to excellent. And with every raise, every bonus, I thought about how I could improve my grandmother's life. I paid off her house. I got her a reliable new car. I hired a cleaning service so she wouldn't have to scrub floors with her arthritic hands. Last year, I bought her a beautiful house in a safe neighborhood with a yard and a porch where she could sit and watch the birds. When I handed her the keys, she sobbed. She said, "You didn't have to do this." I said, "Yes, I did. You gave me everything when you didn't have to. This is just the beginning of paying you back." My life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I had meaningful work. I had financial security. I had the satisfaction of knowing that the woman who raised me was finally comfortable. After years of struggle, I'd built something real. And then, 3 months ago, she showed up. I was at my office, preparing for a deposition, when my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Morrison, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's family, but she doesn't have an appointment." I almost said to send her away. My schedule was packed. But something made me curious. Family. My grandmother was the only family I had left, and she'd never show up at my office unannounced. "Send her in," I said. The door opened, and a woman walked in. She was in her early 50s, well-dressed, with styled hair and expensive jewelry. Behind her was a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, looking uncomfortable. The woman smiled at me, and that's when I saw it. The resemblance. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, features I saw in the mirror every day. My mother. I stood up, more out of shock than politeness. My mouth went dry. 19 years. 19 years of silence, and now she was just standing in my office like she had every right to be there. "Andrew," she said, her voice warm and familiar and completely wrong, "look at you. You've done so well for yourself." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My mind was racing through every emotion at once: shock, anger, confusion, that deep childhood hurt that never really heals. "Who are you?" I finally managed, even though I knew, God, I knew. Her smile faltered slightly. "Honey, it's me, your mom. I know it's been a long time, but—" "19 years?" I interrupted, finding my voice. 19 years isn't a long time. It's a lifetime. Why are you here?" She glanced at the teenager behind her, then back at me. "Can we sit? This is Melissa, your sister. Half-sister, technically. She's 16. My sister. I had a sister. My mother had another child, had a whole other life, while I was struggling to survive with my grandparents. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk, not because I wanted them to stay, but because I needed to sit down before I fell down. "Talk," I said flatly. My mother sat, smoothing her skirt. The girl, Melissa, sat beside her, looking at everything except me. My mother began. "I know I owe you an explanation. When your father died, I wasn't in a good place. I was depressed, grieving, and I couldn't handle being a parent. It was wrong of me to leave the way I did, but I was drowning. I needed to save myself." Save herself? While I was drowning too, at 11 years old, grieving my father and losing my mother. "You never called? Never wrote? Never checked if I was alive or dead? That's not saving yourself. That's abandonment." Her face tightened. "I knew your grandparents would take care of you, and they did, didn't they? You turned out fine." Fine. I turned out fine. As if success erased the trauma, the poverty, the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why my mother didn't love me enough to stay. "Why are you here?" I asked again. "After 19 years, why now?" She exchanged a look with Melissa, and I knew. Before she even spoke, I knew this wasn't about reconciliation or apology. I heard about your success. You're a partner at a law firm, you bought a house, you're doing really well, and I'm so proud of you. Proud. She was proud. The woman who abandoned me was proud of what I'd accomplished without her. Melissa's father left us last year, and I've been struggling. I'm working 2 jobs just to make rent. Melissa needs money for college in a couple of years, and we have nothing saved. I thought maybe, since we're family, since you're doing so well, you could help us out. There it was, the real reason. Not love, not guilt, money. I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. You want money? You want me to give you money. You, the woman who took my father's life insurance and disappeared. You, who never sent $1 in child support or even a birthday card. You want me to help you? We're family, Andrew, she said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. Family helps each other. I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. Family? You lost the right to call yourself my family 19 years ago. My family is my grandmother, the woman who took me in when you threw me away. My family is my grandfather, who worked himself into an early grave helping to raise me. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. Andrew, please, she started. Get out. Get out of my office and don't come back. Melissa finally looked at me then, and I saw tears in her eyes. Part of me felt bad for her. She was just a kid caught in the middle of this. But that wasn't my fault. That wasn't my responsibility. My mother stood, her face flushed with anger now. You're really going to turn your back on your own sister? On me? I turned your back on me first. I learned from the best. She left, Melissa trailing behind her, and I collapsed into my chair. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I felt like I was 11 years old again, reading that note on the kitchen table. But I wasn't 11 anymore. I was 30, and I'd built a life without her. I didn't owe her anything. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I thought my mother would take the hint and disappear back into whatever life she'd built without me. I was wrong. 2 days later, my grandmother called me, her voice shaky. Andrew, your mother came by the house. My blood went cold. What? When? This morning. She knocked on the door with a young girl, said she was your sister. She wanted to talk about you, about family, about making amends. What did you tell her? I asked, already heading for my car. I told her she had a lot of nerve showing up after all these years, my grandmother said, and I could hear the anger in her voice. I told her what she did to you, how you struggled, how hard you worked. I told her she should be ashamed of herself. Good, I said. Did she leave? Yes, but Andrew, she seemed desperate. She kept talking about needing help, about her daughter's future. I think she's going to keep trying. She was right. Over the next few weeks, my mother launched a full campaign to guilt me into giving her money. She showed up at my office again. I had security escort her out. She sent emails, long rambling messages about family obligations and second chances and how Melissa deserved better than a life of poverty. I deleted them without responding. She sent letters to my home address. I don't know how she got it. Letters filled with justifications for leaving, explanations about her mental health, and apologies that felt hollow because they always ended with requests for money. She even showed up at my grandmother's house 2 more times trying to convince her to advocate on her behalf. She's still your daughter, my grandmother told me after the second visit. Part of me feels bad for her. Don't, I said firmly. She made her choices, she lived her life, she doesn't get to come back now and demand a piece of mine. But the worst part was social media. My mother found me on every platform and started commenting on my posts. Not just asking for money, that would have been easier to handle. No, she started posting things designed to make me look bad. So proud of my son Andrew, even if he's forgotten where he came from. Family should stick together through hard times. Hope my son remembers that someday. Raising a daughter alone is hard, but some people have the resources to help and choose not to. She was trying to shame me publicly, trying to turn people against me, trying to paint me as the villain in a story where I was the one who'd been abandoned. I blocked her on everything, but the damage was done. Mutual acquaintances started asking questions, colleagues mentioned seeing posts, even my grandmother's friends at church heard rumors. "Is it true you won't help your mother?" one of my clients asked during a meeting, and I realized just how far this had spread. I had to set the record straight. I called a family meeting with my grandmother. Just the two of us, in her beautiful kitchen in the house I bought her, drinking coffee and facing a problem I'd hoped I'd never have to deal with. "She's escalating," I said. "The social media posts, the surprise visits, the emails, she's not going to stop." My grandmother sighed, looking older than her 82 years. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell her no, clearly, legally if I have to, and I'm going to explain to anyone who asks exactly why." "That will mean telling people what happened," she said gently. "Telling them she left you." "I know," I said, "and I'm okay with that. I'm not ashamed of what happened to me. I'm not ashamed of being abandoned. She should be ashamed of doing the abandoning." My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. "Your grandfather and I never wanted you to have to deal with this. We hoped she'd stay gone for your sake." "I'm glad she's back, in a way," I said, surprising myself, "because now I get to tell her no as an adult. I get to stand up for that 11-year-old kid who couldn't." I drafted an email. Clear, direct, legally sound. I had a colleague in family law review it to make sure I wasn't exposing myself to any liability. The email laid out the facts. She abandoned me after my father's death. She took the life insurance money when she left. She never paid child support. She never contacted me in 19 years. She had no legal or moral claim to my money or my life. I explained that any further contact would be considered harassment and that I would pursue legal remedies if necessary. I offered one thing. If Melissa wanted a relationship with me separate from my mother's agenda, I'd be open to meeting her. But any conversation about money was off the table. I sent it. Then I sent a similar email to the relatives and family friends she'd been contacting, explaining my side of the story. No drama, just facts. The response was overwhelming. Most people were supportive. "I had no idea," one cousin wrote. "She made it sound like you abandoned her." Some people didn't respond at all, which was fine. And a few people, mostly distant relatives who barely knew me, sent judgmental messages about forgiveness and family loyalty. To those people, I had a simple response. Would you give money to someone who abandoned their child? Because that's what you're asking me to do. That usually ended the conversation. My mother sent one final email after that. It was angry, accusatory. She called me selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted. She said I'd regret this, that karma would catch up to me, that I was no better than her. That last part actually made me laugh. If I was no better than her, I'd have a child somewhere that I'd abandoned. I'd have run away from responsibility instead of facing it. I'd have taken money that wasn't mine and never looked back. But I hadn't done any of those things. I'd done the exact opposite. I didn't respond to that email. I didn't need to. I'd said everything I needed to say. 3 weeks after my final email to my mother, I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from Melissa, my half-sister. "Can we talk? Not about money, just talk." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it and block her too. She was connected to my mother, and I wanted nothing to do with that woman. But Melissa was also 16, just a kid, and she was caught in the middle of something that wasn't her fault. I messaged back. "Coffee? Public place? Just you and me." We met at a cafe near my office the following Saturday. She was nervous, clutching her phone like a lifeline, barely making eye contact. "I'm sorry about my mom. She never told me about Melissa, my sister. I didn't know she was going to do all that stuff, the social media posts and everything. I told her to stop, but she wouldn't listen." I sat down across from her. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." She looked up at me then, and I saw something familiar in her eyes. Not physically familiar, she looked like our mother, but emotionally familiar. Pain, uncertainty, the look of a kid who'd been through something difficult. "She told me you were rich and selfish," Melissa said quietly. "But then I looked you up. I read about how you put yourself through law school, how you take care of your grandmother. You're not selfish." "I'm not rich," I said with a slight smile. "Not really. Comfortable, yeah, but I worked for every dollar." "She told me you had money from your dad, that you got inheritance and you're keeping it from us." I shook my head. "My mother took the life insurance money when she left. I got nothing from my father except memories." Melissa's face crumpled. She lied. About everything. We talked for 2 hours. I learned that Melissa's father had left when she was 12, that my mother worked constantly but never seemed to have money because she was bad with finances, always buying things they didn't need. That Melissa was essentially raising herself while my mother worked or socialized. It sounded painfully familiar. "I don't want your money," Melissa said at the end. "I just wanted to meet you. I wanted to know if I had family out there who wasn't like her." Something shifted in me then. Melissa wasn't my mother's pawn. She was a kid who needed stability, who needed someone to show her that you could survive difficult circumstances and build something better. "You have family," I said, "if you want it. Not her. You. We can get to know each other. No money involved, just two people who happen to be related, figuring out if they can have a relationship." She started crying then, and I realized she probably hadn't had many people offer her something without strings attached. We've been meeting for coffee every other week since then. I introduced her to my grandmother, who fell in love with her immediately. She reminds her of me at that age, wounded, but fighting to be okay. I'm helping Melissa with college applications, but not by writing checks. I'm teaching her how to find scholarships, how to write compelling essays, how to navigate the financial aid system. I'm showing her the path I took, the hard way, because I know it's the only way that lasts. My mother tried to contact Melissa about our relationship, to use it as leverage for more money demands. Melissa blocked her number. "I'm done being her excuse," Melissa told me. "I'm gonna make it on my own, like you did." I told her she didn't have to do it completely alone, that accepting help wasn't weakness, that my grandparents helped me, and that made all the difference. But they helped you because they loved you, not because they wanted something from you. Exactly. And that's the kind of help worth accepting. People ask me sometimes, If I feel guilty, if I lie awake at night wondering if I should have helped my mother, should have given her money, should have been the bigger person. The answer is no. I don't feel guilty for having boundaries. I don't feel guilty for protecting the life I built through blood, sweat, and tears. I don't feel guilty for saying no to someone who abandoned me and only came back when she wanted something. Does that make me cold? Maybe to some people. But I know the truth. I know what it took to get here. I know the nights I worked until exhaustion. I know the sacrifices I made. I know the love and dedication my grandparents poured into raising me when they should have been enjoying their retirement. My success isn't luck. It isn't privilege. It's the direct result of hard work and people who loved me selflessly. My mother had 19 years to be a part of my life. 19 years to call, to write, to show up. She chose not to. She doesn't get to choose now when it's convenient for her. Some people say family is everything, that you should forgive family no matter what, that blood is thicker than water. But the full quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose are stronger than the bonds we're born with. My grandmother chose to raise me. My grandfather chose to work extra jobs to support me. I chose to work myself to the bone to give them a better life. Those choices, that love, that commitment, that's real family. My mother is a stranger who happens to share my DNA. And I don't owe strangers anything just because we're genetically related. I've built a good life. I have work I'm proud of. I have my grandmother, who still calls me every morning to make sure I ate breakfast. I have Melissa now, a sister I'm getting to know and hoping to support in healthy ways. I have peace. And that peace comes from knowing that I don't have to carry other people's burdens just because they demand it. I don't have to sacrifice my stability for someone else's poor choices. I don't have to light myself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially not someone who left me freezing in the dark. My mother might tell people I'm heartless. She might play the victim to anyone who will listen. She might spend the rest of her life believing that I owe her something. But I know the truth, and so does everyone who matters. I survived being abandoned. I survived poverty. I survived grief and uncertainty and all the challenges that came with building a life from nothing. I not only survived, I thrived. And I did it without her. So no, I don't feel guilty. I feel proud. Proud of that 11-year-old kid who didn't give up. Proud of the teenager who worked 2 jobs while getting straight A's. Proud of the law student who studied until 3 in the morning and still made it to his shift at 6. Proud of the man I've become, the man who takes care of the people who took care of him. My mother wanted a share of my life and my money, but she can't have it because this life, this success, this stability, it's not hers to share. It belongs to me and the people who actually helped me build it. And that's a boundary I'll never apologize for.
If you're listening to this and you've dealt with something similar, a parent who left, a family member who only comes around when they need something, someone who demands your success while contributing to none of it, I want you to know something. You don't owe them anything. Your success is yours. Your peace is yours. Your life is yours. It's okay to say no. It's okay to have boundaries. It's okay to protect what you've built. And if people judge you for it, they don't know your story. They didn't live through your pain. They didn't work your jobs or cry your tears or fight your battles. You did. So stand firm, protect your peace. Honor the people who actually showed up for you. And don't let anyone guilt you into giving away what you earned. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially not someone who left you in the cold. My name is Andrew. I'm 30 years old. I'm a lawyer, a grandson, and now a brother. And I built this life brick by brick with no help from the woman who gave birth to me. She wanted a share of everything I built, but some things aren't for sharing. Some things you earn by showing up day after day, year after year, and she never showed up. So this life, it's mine, and I'm keeping it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I hope it gave you permission to set your own boundaries, to protect your own peace, and to remember that you don't owe anyone access to the life you built without them. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the people who actually took care of you.